tabs, there is some good information about stakeholder management in one of the tabs, some scenarios that would like you to read on your after the class, or just keep reading everything that's in there to see if something may be helpful. All right, so 6:35. I guess we can get started here. I don't want to wait. I know folks will be joining us a little bit later, so let's just stop this one and look at the spreadsheet that I sent over. I think it's going to be sort of a review. We'll do a quick review. Just share the screen. And there it is. Okay. All right. So you should be able to see the Excel spreadsheet. If you don't, let me know. If you do, give me a thumbs up. All right. So what I want to do, and I wanted to sort of I don't want to slow down too much, but at least I want to touch on these terms, because we did talk about these terms, and you may have taken some notes, and it may be in the PowerPoint that I have already attached to Canvas for this week, but this will give you a little bit more like a summary. This is my project term summary. And what we may do is every Wednesday, we're going to have a review of terms from the week before. So right now we are sort of reviewing the terms about the first couple of chapters. And the next week, we're going to review the terms on stakeholder management and so forth. So we'll be 1 week behind. And this would be another place for you to go and review definitions. So at least you should know these, and there may be some missing, and we'll keep adding to it. And in the end, when we are done with this course, you will have a slew of these. It looks like you may have gotten something already. All right, so let's review project management. The key terms here are knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques. So if, let's say, you have a PMP or CPM question, and they're saying, what is project management? You should be able to see knowledge in one of the answers, skills, tools, and techniques. If you see those 4 keywords, then you know that is the right definition of project management. Program is a group of related projects managed in a coordinated way to obtain benefits not available from managing projects individually. When you think of program, think of multiple projects under one umbrella, all having the same goal. So that's that. Portfolio is a collection of projects, programs, and sub-portfolios and operations managed as a group. So portfolio is a bucket in which you have projects, programs, for the most part, and that's one way for management to go to one place to see how they're doing as a portfolio of elements of these assets that folks are working on. So portfolio is that entity. Moving on, stakeholder, an individual or organization that is actively involved in or affected by the project. Stake in the ground. Project life cycle. So we looked at the product life cycle and the project life cycle. It's a series of phases. Remember, there are 5 phases: initiation, planning, execution, and monitoring, control, and closing. That project goes through from its initiation to its closure. That's the project life cycle. Project governance, the framework, policies, and procedures. So I see a couple of people that you have joined. We're doing a review of some of the terms that we have already have gone through last week. So this is just a review, and I've sent this document over in the email. If you have not received it, that's fine. You should receive it by the time we're done with this session today. If you still haven't received it, do let me know. But so that's what we're doing. Project governance, These are definitions, and you should know these definitions. At least you should know. You don't have to memorize anything. You should have a conceptual idea of what all these things are. So when you talk about project governance, the framework, policies, procedures that guide the project's decision-making process. So you could have a team governance as well, where you are talking about how many meetings we're going to have, who's going to be in our teams, and how we're going to pretty much govern our collaboration and our work as we proceed through planning, execution, and so forth. PMO office, an organizational unit within the project management structure that is responsible for centralizing and coordinating project management activities. So just keep in mind that most of the project managers have a home, and that home is the project management office. If small companies may not have it, but large companies do. Project charter, again, if somebody says, why do we need a charter? Because it formally authorizes the existence of a project. Formally authorizes. All right. Project scope. When we talk about scope, what do we mean? The work that needs to be accomplished to deliver a product, service, or result. So we talked about the product, service, and or result with specified features and functions. So that's what the scope is. And then we dive into it and talk about requirements, talk about scope statement, and so forth. But if you bubble it up, that's what we're talking about is what are we trying to produce here? What sort of problem we're trying to solve, and does that have to do with delivering a product, service, or result? Work breakdown structure. We talked about that very briefly. It comes out of the requirements. So when you complete the requirements and start to build your scope statement, the next step would be the WBS, which is sort of a hierarchical display of all the major components that a project would deliver. And then from there, we build our schedule. So that's a step in between. Sometimes we kind of bypass it and go from scope statement. After we collect the requirements, go to scope statement, and we sort of bypass WBS and go direct into schedule. That's not a good idea, because at the WBS level, we really are going to interact with our team and say, okay, given these big components, we need to break it down. So go and take each of these components and come back to me with an estimated time for how long each of the components is going to take, so we can build our schedules together. All right, so this is a lot of PMP questions. If they have WBS as the answer, more than likely that is the answer. So this WBS is very critical, very important component. Decomposition means break it down. If you have a big chunk of work, you got to break it down. The very bottom layer is the work package, the very bottom of that. So you may have a couple of levels. The very last one is the work package. Decomposition is a good word to keep in mind. Project schedule, we're going to have a chapter on it. We're going to talk about how to build a schedule. It comes after the WBS. Are we good so far? No questions? All right. We talked about the risk. That's when we talk about the charter, we talk about the risk at high level. What exactly is risk? We'll have a chapter on it, but it's really an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, has a positive or negative impact. So risk can have a positive impact, or it can have a negative impact. We never talk about a positive impact usually, right? We talk about the negative impact, but risk can have a positive impact also. So keep these definitions in mind. If they show up in any of the questions, at least you know that, yep, that's the right definition of all of these terms. Quality management, communication management, these are different chapters, and it just summarizes what we mean by it, the processes and activities used to ensure that project satisfies the needs for which it was undertaken. So quality and requirements. So remember, when you have your requirement, quality is a component of your requirement. We want an iPhone of certain quality, and is a requirement that's inserted into your requirement, but has to be verified. Has to be verified. Has to be validated. So when we talk about quality, we talk about verification and validation. Very key important components of quality. And who verifies? The team verifies. Who validates? The customer validates. So you cannot just go live with the product unless both have taken place, verification and validation. Keep that in mind, very important. Communication management, systematic planning, implementation, monitoring, and revision of all project communication activities. We'll have a chapter on that, and then we'll dive into it. Cost management, again, it's all about estimating, planning, estimating, coming up with a budget, financing, funding, and controlling costs. So funding is something that is equivalent to having a budget. So if you say we want to fund this project and give it $1 million, you're really saying, you're declaring that we're going to provide a budget of $1 million, and then you have to verify that that's really what you need in the planning. So planning initially, when you have the charter, you get the funds, you get a high-level budget, but then in planning you have to make sure that that's the correct budget for a little bit of planning, but mostly you're focused on the execution. Integration. So integration is almost like putting it all together, everything. And what does that entail? Identifying, defining, combining, unifying, and coordinating various processes and management activities within the 5 groups, the 5 phases: initiation, planning, execution, monitor, control, and closing. So how do we integrate all of that within those 5 phases is integration. And sometimes they say, they'll ask this question, what does a project manager do? A project manager does a lot of stuff, but one of the main role that project manager plays is to integrate all of these things, to combine them, put them all together. It's like a gluing all of them together, so that everything is cohesive, connected, and everything flows in the right order, which includes obviously people, process, and the business environment. All of those should be connected, integrated into a cohesive method to successfully complete the project. Scope management, how to manage the scope, and we're going to talk about scope starting week after next. Next week we're going to focus on resources because that's where team comes into play. Time management is about schedule. Human resources, a resource chapter. So I'm going to skip some of these. You can read them on your own. Risk management was the risk. We talked about that. Procurement management is about planning, soliciting, source selection. When they talk about source selection, they're talking about a seller, a vendor selection, contract administration, and contract closeout. So this is an interesting chapter, actually, procurement management, and we will touch on this in the coming weeks. Stakeholder management is our focus for this week. Project management information system. So project managers have a tool. They have a tool which they use to create their schedule. They have a tool which allows them to store information like the team site. That could be the PMI system, but not by itself, but in addition to a place where you can put the documents, you also need a place where you can go and create your schedule. So it could be just one big system, one big application, and they're calling that PMIS, Project Management Information System. Big companies have it. Small companies may not, but tools, obviously, every project manager has a tool. At a minimum, you just need an Excel spreadsheet. At a minimum, you can get a project up and running and moving with just an Excel spreadsheet. But you can become a little bit more sophisticated, and you can use Microsoft Project Plan, to create a schedule. You can use a Primavera to create a schedule. You can use Plan View, which is another. There's so many out there. Jira is another one where if you're doing an agile type project, you use Jira, Jira. Trello. There's so many. All right. So, but exam is not going to quiz you on any of them. All they are going to consider is for you to know that there is such a thing as a PMIS, Project Management Information System. All right. Organization process assets. This used to be in PMBOK 7, PMBOK 6. They would call all of these assets, for example, your lessons learned, your plans from other projects, all the documentation, all the archive documentation, all of those things constitute what they call as organizational process assets, OPA. You may not get a question asking you about OPAs, but you will get a question about, what do you do with these documents? These are your assets, these are documents, and you use those documents to plan to move forward. I mean, let's say you're given a project, and that project is a phase 2 project. So phase 1, somebody else did it. You have to go and look, and you can look up that information, their lessons learned, their schedule, and you can repurpose it for your project. And all of these are assets. All of these are process assets, and they belong to the organization, right? They don't belong to the project manager. They belong to the PMO or the organization. Project constraints. What is a project constraint? We talked about that, something that limits the project team's options, such as time, costs, scope, quality, resources, risk. All of these can be your project constraints. So if there's a question about constraints and they give you a bunch of answers and say which one of is a constraint is the right answer, if you see time, cost, scope, quality, resources in that answer, that's a constraint. All right. Change control. We talked about change control. Every time there's a change, especially in the execution phase, change control comes into play in the execution phase for a predictive type project. So the process of managing changes to the project scope, schedule, and budget throughout the project life cycle. So changes can happen. Mostly change control, you see change control actually in the execution, but changes do happen across the board. But there's no change control in planning. There's no change control there. There's change control in execution, and that's something you got to keep in mind. We'll bypass this number 27 because it's part of cost. And when we get to the chapter, we're going to talk about earned value management. What is that? Quality assurance. Yes, go ahead, Azim.
You said that there is no change control in planning.
There's no change control in planning because in planning you're planning, right? You're going to have changes, and you're not going to go through a formal process to get approval. You're just going to add that to your plan, and then you're going to the approval is not going to be formal. In other words, it's something that, because in planning you're sort of you are put into a room with a bunch of people, and you have to figure it out, right? In the figuring out, there could be a lot of changes, right? And so you cannot go to any formal approval because you're figuring it out. You're designing, right? So once you design, once you have a plan that has been figured out, brainstormed, discussed, and you have a schedule, then you have a baseline. You have a scope baseline, a cost baseline, and a budget baseline, or cost baseline, schedule baseline, and scope baseline. Once you have that, then if you have a change after that point, then it has to go through a change control. But before, you are just, it's part of your planning. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Thank you, sir.
All right. So, and that's a good thing, because they will give you a budget to complete this project, right? And when you start your charter, you get a budget, let's say, to build this house, and then you start planning. And then as you're planning, you say, I want more money because, whatever you gave me, and after we planned it out, met with the customers, it's going to cost maybe $20,000 more. So that's acceptable to do that, to ask for, which is called reforecasting, by the way. But so ask for more money because you are planning, So changes like that are acceptable, and they don't really have to go through a formal process until you get to the execution phase. All right. Quality assurance is verification. Quality assurance is validation. So when we talk about validation, we are talking about quality assurance. We'll talk about this when we get to the quality chapter. So this is just to give you a little highlight. Change management. Okay, the process used to ensure that changes to the project are documented, approved, and implemented in a controlled manner. So this is part of the change control, change management. So this sort of falls within that. There's another kind of change management where you're trying to make sure the users are able to adopt to the change. That's a change management. That's a different type of change management where users are trained to be aware of what's coming their way. Project management plan. So when we talk about project management plan, what do we mean? It's a document that describes how the project will be executed, monitored, and controlled. The triple constraint. It includes the baselines, the management plans, and subsidiary plans. So all the plans that we are going to put together in this project, the change management plan, the quality plan, the schedule plan, the procurement plan, all of the 10 knowledge areas will have some sort of planning within each of those. All of those plans, your baselines that you're going to create at the end of planning, your cost baseline, your scope baseline, and your time baseline, those will constitute your plan, and so you're going to monitor and control those. You're going to make sure you stay within those plans, right? That's what, when they talk about project management plan, that's what they really mean. So this is a good definition to keep in the back of your mind in case it pops up in any of your questions. Lessons learned, we talked about that. One other addition to the definition of lessons learned is that it includes both positive and negative experiences. So obviously that makes sense, right? With lessons learned, you got some bad stuff to report and you got some good stuff to report. Not just all good or not all bad. Just like the risk, you can have a good and a positive risk and a negative risk. Risk register. Okay, so risk register, think of risk register as a bucket. A stakeholder register, another bucket. So these registers are nothing but Excel spreadsheets in which you are going to document your risks. So what exactly you're going to document? You're going to first of all have to identify the risk, and once we go through the chapter, we're going to identify, then we're going to figure out the probability of this happening, potential impact, and then response. So those are the things that really constitute your risk register components. What is the risk? How often what is the probability of it happening? Low, medium, high. What is the potential impact? Low, medium, high. And then if it does happen, what do we do? And there are four main things that we talk about when it comes to response, and we'll talk about those in the risk chapter. Project status report, we know what that means. Work performance data, we talked about that. Work performance data, work performance information, we convert from data into information. Project closeout, that happens in the closing phase. Lessons learned register, just like you have a risk register, stakeholder register, you have a lessons learned register. Don't worry too much about these registers. You just need to know that you're capturing information about your lessons learned, you're capturing information about your risk, and you're capturing information about your stakeholders. That's all. That's what you need to know. And when are you capturing those information? So for risk, all that from start to end. Lessons learned from start to end. Stakeholder from start to end. So nothing to read to forget. you just have to capture this information, because you're going to use this information to make sure nothing falls through the cracks. All right, project stakeholder management. We are on that one. Baselines. We talked about those 3 baselines. You should know those. OPS. Okay, this is a redundancy here. I'm going to delete this one. Constraints. This is also redundant here. Delete that one. Okay, assumptions. So what is an assumption? Factors that are believed to be true but not yet proven. So this is the formal definition of assumption. So they're used as a basis for project planning and decision making. So an assumption is good to have assumptions, but you got to prove it. You got to prove that this assumption is correct. Otherwise, it's gonna become a risk really for you. Project closeout report. We're going to create one. Once we close out the project, we're going to have a closeout report in which we're going to summarize our outcome. Did we produce a product, a service, or a result? And we could include in there your lessons learned and any recommendations. So this closeout report is created after you complete a project. And sometimes when you create this report, you have to present this report to your stakeholders. And it's just like a summary of what we have accomplished. That's what this is. So you can close out formally. It's like a formal process. All right, we're going to delve on some of these in detail, but right now I want you to know these definitions. So when we talk about those things, it's not like, where all this came from. Yes, go ahead.
About project closeout report, you said we need to present it to stakeholders. Is it every stakeholder that we want to present it to, or there will be only specific stakeholders?
Good question. It depends on your environment where you are actually doing the project or your company, but usually at a minimum you have to present it to your sponsors. That would be the minimum. And maximum would be you present it to all your stakeholders who helped you in the project, who were your champions, who you went to for questions. Your customer could be one of the person who would be in that meeting or listening to your presentation. So again, it depends on your company, your business environment. At a minimum, I would say it would be your sponsors, and maximum it would be all the stakeholders that you remember in the charter. You have to put in the name of the stakeholders, all of those people. Now you got to go in, and at the end of this project, you got to tell them, hey, you did a great job. Actually, you will not be the one presenting it. It will be the sponsors who would be presenting it, that's how it's done in some companies. But again, I don't think PMBOK tells you who's the one who's going to do it, but it's usually the sponsors, but not necessarily. It could be the project manager. All right, project cost management, integration management. So integration management, I think it's a duplicate. Let's take it out. Quality assurance is also a duplicate. These are duplicate. Let's just take them out. Okay, resource management, it's not a duplicate. Let's just keep that in there. Communication plan. Okay, communication plan is important. Plan, if say what exactly goes inside a communication plan. Really, this is a document that outlines the approach to communication on the project, includes the type of information to be communicated, the recipients, who we're going to communicate it to, and how often you're going to communicate it to. So that's what the communication plan is about. What you're going to communicate, the reports, your project reports, your monthly reports, your weekly reports, or meeting notes, and then that would be at a minimum, your milestone report or your Gantt chart, and then who you're going to report it to and how often. Usually, it's usually monthly to all the stakeholders, and weekly to your team members. Weekly to your team members and monthly to all your stakeholders. And I think it's a good practice to do that. Even though you're meeting with them, let's say twice a week or once a week, whatever, at the end of the week on a Friday, you should put together what did we do to, what was accomplished this week, accomplished, what they're working on, and what are the next steps. Minimum three things: what they accomplished, what deliverable they completed, what they're working on up to now, or you can include a week or 2 weeks. I think it's a weekly, and then what's coming up next week. So it's good to do that. Usually the stakeholders may require that, but some of the stakeholders want to know what you're doing every week. Where is their money going? So they want to know on a week to week basis what are they doing, and it's a good way to keep them informed. The team may say, we see each other and we know what we're doing, but I think it's good for the stakeholders because they don't see the team's work on a weekly basis, especially when you have projects that are very speedy projects, very time constrained, or very aggressive projects, aggressively moving forward on a very short timeline, maybe 2 or 3 months or 4 months. When you in an agile project, that's like a weekly stand-up meeting. So you don't probably have to do that because you're doing a weekly stand-up meeting, not a daily stand-up meeting. But for a predictive project which may span 3 or 4 months, I think a weekly report, a quick, short weekly report at the end of the week, every Friday, would be very much appreciated by the stakeholders. Maybe not by the team, but by the stakeholders. And it also keeps them informed, and they're not going to complain, hey, we don't know what these guys are doing, I just don't know what they're doing. And after, they may complain later on because they feel like they are not participating enough. Well, you know what we're doing, and if you want to participate, you can see the report, and if you have feedback to give us, you can give us, because you know what the team is doing. And sometimes when you have these meetings with the stakeholders, in the beginning, especially when you're planning, you got to meet with them to gather the requirements, right? So you are seeing them almost every week. But then after the planning phase has ended, the stakeholder, the customer sort of go in the behind the scenes, and then you continue with your execution. And so these weekly reports really come into play when you do that, because they are now informed on a very on a very short duration, week to week basis, which is really good. Stakeholder management. Remember, this is how you're managing the stakeholders, by these weekly reports, communicating to them. Okay, risk management, sponsor, definition of sponsor: a person or group within an organization that provides the financial resources, oversight, and support for a project. 3 things: resources, oversight, and support, and for a project. So you can escalate to your sponsor, right? If you need more funding, you can reforecast. The word is reforecast, to ask for more funds. And who are you going to ask the funds from? The sponsor. And they are going to support you throughout if you keep them informed. You work with them in a formal manner, keep them satisfied, meet their needs, and that's pretty much it. And invite them on deliverables which have to be reviewed. Maybe feedback is needed from them. So wherever the case may be, you just have to make sure that because they are playing the role of the sponsors, and stakeholders are playing the role of the reviewers, approvers, acceptors, right? They're not building, they're not testing, they're not training, they're not analyzing. They are providing you feedback about, yes, you're doing a good job. So they're approving, they're validating, approving, and they are providing feedback on as far as the customer, what requirements, what they need, and that's pretty much it, right? They are not really building the product. The team is building the product, but they are the ones who are going to sign off. Triple constraint. So whenever I use the word triple constraint, I always draw this triangle, right? And so you draw your triangle. One side of the triangle is scope, schedule is the other side, and the third side is cost. So this triple constraint is is what the project manager is really focusing on during monitoring and control of the deliverables, of the effort that the team is doing. Looking at the scope, making sure that they are building it within the scope, within the time, and within the budget. Okay, project performance measurement baseline. We talked about those three. Change requests. We talked about we touched on that change request, the change control. So every time you make a change, you have to re-baseline your cost, scope, and budget in case any of those are impacted. So keep that in mind. When you have a change, it's going to impact your triple constraint. If it's a significant change, for an insignificant change like a defect, if you have a defect, you take corrective action, you're fine, right? You are running a program, writing a code, and the code bombs. You go in, fix it. That's not a big impact, right? It's just something the teams is doing as part of testing. But if something new is required, then obviously that's going to have an impact, and subsequently you may have to re-baseline your triple constraint depending on which of those three are impacted. Project success criteria. When somebody says, do you need a project success criteria? They're really talking about, what is that one thing or two things or three things that they have to check off to go live. Project success criteria could be your go live checklist, couldn't it? If you're trying to go live, what are you going to check off to go live? You've got to make sure, they've done the due diligence and they've gone through building and testing and training and change management and validation. UAT is what they call it, user acceptance testing, or just validation. So those could be on your success criteria. Make sure all of that is done. Lessons learned database. Sometimes you keep the lessons learned in a database so you can reuse it, repurpose it. All right, scope creep. Okay, scope creep is going to come up when we do the project, the chapter on scope, and all. Creep means your scope is overflowing. You had baselined it, and now you want to add something new, a new feature, for example. So when you add more to it, you're creeping the scope. It's called scope creep, and it's not a good thing. The uncontrolled expansion of the project scope, uncontrolled, often resulting in schedule delays, increased costs, and decreased quality. So just keep this in mind. In the PMP, if they talk about these things, they're talking about scope creep. We already talked about sponsor. Project procurement plan is the plan to actually acquire a solution from a seller. Decomposition. Remember WBS, decompose. Contingency reserve, that's going to show up in your cost. So we're just going to make that red because we don't have to talk about that right now. So resource constraints. We talked about that. Quality control. We talked about some of these are repeating here, and I'm going to remove those on our next go round. As I see that some of them are have been spoken for earlier. All right, I think that's pretty much all I want to do as a formal review. You can go through this list and see if anything that you are unclear about, you can bring it to my attention or text me. I don't understand what this is. So we're going to keep adding to this list as you go from chapter to chapter to chapter, and so by the time you're done, you'll have a whole bunch of these summarized concepts. So it'd be easy for you to review it for the final. All right. Any questions thus far?
No, sir.
One thing I would like you to tell me, and the way I want to kind of quiz you every week, and I'm working on that. I'm going to start this next week. I'm going to send you a Q&A, sort of a survey. starting next week. And in that survey, I'm going to ask every one of you, I'm going to send you individually, like to each one of you and ask you and send you some terms. And then you have to respond back if you know what those terms are. Yes and no, yes and no, yes and no. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I want to make sure that you are following up, doing your due diligence, learning, understanding, and that based on the survey, I'll feel that, yep, looks like we are accomplishing something here. So starting next week, I'm going to send you a survey of terms only. I'm going to send you, do you know what a risk register means? And you can tell me yes and no. If you just say yes, that means that I'm going to assume you're telling me the truth that yes, you already know what that is. If you say no, then we're going to bring those terms back in the class and go over those. And I'm not going to tell that who said no to it. I'm just going to review the no's. All right, so that's what I'm thinking. This way, you will have to force yourself to learn some of these things if you're not already doing it. All right. Let's see. It's 7:10. Let's shift gears. And before we jump to stakeholder management, I want to talk about our next topic, which is agile. So let's just close this one out. Just stop it here. And I do see we have everyone here. So I'm going to take a snapshot of all of you so I can update my roster here. So here it goes. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people. That's very good. So next item is agile. So we're going to shift gears a little bit before we jump to stakeholder and then do some questions on that. So this would be interesting. I think hopefully you will get a better idea when we talk about agile. What is it? What is this, and why is it different from predictive? And now you'll know. Today you'll know. Now this is a brief now. So there are two versions of what we're going to learn today. One is this brief version. And the other one is, let me do something here. So one is a brief version, and the other one is going to be version 2, the second version. This is the first version. And so I'm not going to throw everything at you at the same time. And the reason being, if you get too much to chew, you're not going to learn anything. So if you understand the brief version, then you'll understand the advanced version. So we're going to spend some time until our break, maybe 30 minutes on this. So first of all, when we talk about agile, we are talking about adaptive approach, ADAPTIVE, adaptive approach, or we're talking about predictive approach. Adaptive or predictive. No, I'm sorry. No, that's not correct. Adaptive, or agile, or change driven. Change driven, agile, adaptive all mean the same thing. When you talk about predictive, that's the waterfall. So this is the waterfall. So that's the different approach. Approach is different. Goal is the same goal. One, you do it the way it's described here, and we'll walk through that. But again, even in this flow that you see here, this is the workflow or how it's done. You still have to go through those 5 process phases, So you may do it sort of quickly. For example, here you see it says sprint planning, the word planning. So this is your actually right here is your planning phase right here. Your planning phase. Where it says here, you're starting, let's say right here, somewhere somewhere here. So that would be your initiation. Then you go into, and this is your sponsor here, product owner. This is our sponsor. I hope you received this PowerPoint in the email by now. If you have, give me a thumbs up. This way you can sort of follow. All right, so it looks like you guys have gotten it. Great. So this diagram.
Sorry, Prof. I did not.
Me
Okay.
neither.
Okay, both of you, if you can send me your email address, maybe the one that I have is not working. Either that, or it's going into your, into your one of your, I don't know, folders where it's just junking it. Your junk folder or something.
Sam.
I received previous emails from you, and no problem.
Okay.
So, and the one that you have on your roster there is correct.
Interesting. So maybe it's still on its way. I'll send it again. I'll send this whole thing again.
Thank
All right.
you.
All right.
I haven't received any emails from you at all. So
Okay.
I'm
So
on my phone, so I'm not sure if
Okay.
you have the right email address or not.
So this is my request to all of you. If you have another email that you use in addition to your HCC email, send me that. So I'm going to add that to my my email all of my emails. So this will be in addition to, in case one of your email doesn't reach you, the other email will reach you. So if you can send me via text, send me your email via text, or put it in the chat. Put in the chat your name and your email. If you have an email that you use a lot, send me, give me that one. Because I'm using the email that I have been provided, and maybe for some reason you're not getting it, that those not going through for whatever reason. So I'm giving you another option here to for me to send stuff over to you. All right, looks like some of you are doing that already. Great. I'm going to pick up that information today at the end of this class or during our break. So just put it in the chat and I'll pick it up from there. All right, so let's go back to this. So this is where you're going to start initiation, and then I'm going to just demark here. So this is a sprint planning meeting. So this is you're doing your planning here, and we'll talk about this a little bit in a few minutes. But so this is your planning. And then you start your sprint backlog. This is your execution here. Execution phase. All the way to right here. And now this is your closing phase. All right, if you have not received anything, you can take a snapshot if you like on your phone, but I'm gonna send this to you, so no worries. Okay, just send me your emails. All right, so even though it looks a little bit different from the way you're sort of thinking about the 5 processes: initiation, planning, execution. Now your monitor and control is still here. It's invisible, but still here, right in this area. Monitor and control, and monitor and control sort of works alongside with execution. So when you're building a car, for example, you're also monitoring how you're building it. You're also controlling how you're building it, right? Monitor and control always goes along with execution. So that's why they're sort of together. So this is so let's walk through this process. First of all, the players. Who are the players? The first is product owner. Make sure you differentiate the product owner from a sponsor that we are calling from the beginning. When it comes to Agile, they call their sponsors product owners. It's very possible they also have sponsors too. But this product owner sort of has a lot of power to make decisions, which is almost like the sponsor, because sponsor has a lot of power to make high-level decisions. For example, if you need to reforecast or need more funding, more money, you can go to your product owner and he can talk to maybe the sponsor, whoever, and he can probably help you with that, just like the sponsor would. Or if you want to, if there's a scope change, if there's a change, something is being added to your requirements, you can go to the product owner and say, are you going to approve it? Instead of going through the change control like you would for a predictive type method, if you have a change during your sprint, you can go to your product owner, and then product owner will then go to the customer and tell the customer, or he's going to add it to this bucket. So let's talk about the buckets now. This is bucket 1 and this is bucket 2. There are 2 buckets in Agile. And the first bucket is called product backlog. Product backlog. BACKLOG. The other one is called sprint backlog. So I think it's also written in Spanish here. These are Spanish or some other language. I don't know what that is. Okay, no worries. But that's what this is. And you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this product backlog could have 8. What they call in Agile they're called user stories. User stories. Let's go back to this. User stories, and user stories are nothing but requirements. So they have 8 requirements, 8 user stories, and we'll touch on what a user story may look like in a few minutes. But for right now, just think of this customer, the sponsor, product owner, going to the customer. Remember, in the predictive, the team goes to the customer. The team goes to the customer and says, what do you need? Here in Agile, the product owner goes to the customer, not the team. The team is right here. Consider this team as your programmers. These are your programmers. They are not going to go to the customer and say, what do you need? They're going to leave that role, that responsibility to the product owner. And the product owner is going to meet with the customer and document all the user stories and add them to this backlog, which is nothing but a bucket in which you put user stories. And user stories could be like this, I as a customer want a report that is going to give me the sales for the month, for example. That's how the user stories sort of are stated. I, as a customer, I need something. So that's how they do it. So you can have 8 user stories or 100 user stories. Doesn't matter. So the product owner will visit with the customer and sit down with them, go through the requirement gathering, and then bring those to the team, but not give to the team to do anything. He's going to put it in the product backlog. This product backlog could also probably is going to be prioritized in what we need to do first, second, third, fourth. I mean, if you have 8 of them, and let's say you want to start your first sprint. So this is your sprint right here. Sprint spans 2 to 4 weeks. 2 to 4 weeks. So before they start the sprint, the team is going to meet up with the product owner. And it's very possible the customer may also be there in that meeting. They're going to look at the product backlog, and then they're going to decide, based on this 2 to 4 weeks sprint, how much of the work they can do. So they're going to play some poker to estimate, and we talk about this when we do the second version of the Agile process. I want you to learn the Agile process at this level first before we get into this poker business. But basically, it's a method by which you estimate. So this team is going to work with the sponsor and the customer in this sprint planning meeting to figure out how much work they can take on during 2 to 4 weeks. And it's maybe decided for example, that they just want to take on the first 5 of these user cases. Out of the 8 of them, they just want to do the first 5. And once they decide, this team decides, by working with the product owner and with the customer, based on the value they're going to produce, based on what the customer wants to, for this team to get done first in the first sprint. So this is the first sprint here. You may have 50 sprints. This is the first one. So they're going to do five of these user stories. They're building something. Maybe they're building a website, and they just don't want to build the whole Amazon.com because that's going to take a lot of time. They just want to build the front end, maybe the first few pages, the basic functionality. And so the first 5 user stories may be just about the first few pages. They said, we're going to do this. We can get it done in 2 to 4 weeks. They have an agreement now with the product owner and the customer that they're going to do the first 5 and the sprint. And then they're going to put those 5 in what they call sprint backlog. Because they're going to start a sprint, so they're going to take it from this product backlog, which may have 50 or 100 or we don't know how many. They could have a lot of them. They're just going to take the 5 out based on the priority, based on the customer's agreement, and product owner's okay, and they're going to start to build on this 5 user stories in the first sprint by just taking one from the sprint backlog, working on that. They take another one from the sprint backlog, working on that, another one. So they'll have to pull from here as they're building and testing these user stories. So what do you think who is the Scrum Master, by the way? Scrum Master is the PM. They call them the Scrum Master. PMI or PMP exams are not going to call them the Scrum Master. They're just going to call them project managers. But Agile, has their own nomenclature, so they call these people Scrum Masters. All right. So what's the role of this project manager / the Scrum Master? He owns this process, this whole process. He's going to make sure we put the stuff in the product log. He's going to make sure we have a sprint planning meeting. He's going to make sure we start to pull out stuff and put it in the sprint backlog, or he may do it for them. And he's going to monitor and control this sprint over 2 to 4 weeks. And the way he's going to manage it is by having daily Scrum meetings. Every day he's going to have a 15-minute daily Scrum meeting, a stand-up. He's just going to come into a room where the team members are, the programmers are, the coders are who are building this website, and it's going to ask them 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And do you have any roadblocks? What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And if you have any roadblocks. And they may come up with some roadblocks. He's going to document those, and he's going to work with them, not in this 15 minutes. This 15 minutes is just to get the status and for him to update his project plan. He's going to bring this project plan and he's going to walk them through that. He's going to update that in front of them. And usually there are many applications they use. One of them is called Jira, Jira. That's one of them that's very popular these days. There are many. So this is one of them. So, and once that's done, he's going to document, if there's any issues, any roadblocks. If there are no roadblocks, after 50 minutes, they go back and work on the task that they have to work on that day. It's a daily thing. So we got 2 weeks. Every day they have to go through this. Now, in all the projects that I do where I'm doing, usually the projects I work on are mostly hybrid. They have a little bit of sprint in there, and then some of it is not sprint. It's just a predictive. So I don't have daily stand-ups, But if it was exclusive sprint, I was time boxed. That's why they got time box, and you're time boxed, into this 2 to 4 weeks duration. Then I'll have my daily stand up. And why do you think they have daily stand ups? Who can tell me? Why is a daily stand up necessary?
To make sure you're on track.
There you go. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. So if we didn't have the daily, you can just imagine after 3 or 4 days, some of them may be slacking, right? If you have a daily one, then you know immediately if they've done something or not, because they know that next day they're going to talk about it in front of the team, and they got to make sure they have something to show for the time they spent the day before, right? So to keep track of their work, we're going to have this daily. Now, sometimes what happens is, as a practical thing, if let's say you are working on a 3-month project, not a 2 to 4 week, but a 3 or 4 month project, and you are falling behind. Let's say you had your schedule and you start to find that you're falling behind, and you were having your weekly meeting, like one meeting a week, and that was fine, because if you were on track, then one meeting a week is perfectly fine. But you're discovering that you're falling behind. So what will be the first thing you're going to do? You're going to increase the number of meetings for just that reason. So you were having one meeting per week. Now you're going to have a meeting that's on a Monday, and then you're going to have a meeting on a Friday. So the team members know that the PM is going to call a meeting on Friday or Thursday, whichever works, to find out what have they done, because we don't want that, because the project is slipping, right? If the schedule is slipping, you have to figure out now how. Now there are other ways that you will learn how you can catch up, but this is another way. And it's a good way, actually. And also, for example, I'm working on a project right now where something is due on this Friday, and so I had a meeting with them on Tuesday, and then I said we're going to meet on Thursday, a day before. Why am I doing this? I'm sending them a signal that I'm in business. I know you will get it done by Friday, but what if something happens on, that you cannot? At least on Thursday, I'll know, and I can warn whoever needs that deliverable, right? And I can warn the people something happened, or I can escalate, or I can do something. But if on Friday, I want the deliverable, and if they say, because something happened on Wednesday or Thursday, we are not able to deliver on Friday. Now, there's nothing I can do about it, because the time has already passed, right? That's why, that's one of the ways by which you can sort of, rein in case you are falling behind. But the sprint is sort of devised that way. The agile sprint are devised that way because they know they go very fast. Sometimes your sprint is only 2 weeks, but generally they're about 4 weeks, because 2 weeks is just not enough time to do the planning and then execution and then testing. You've got to plan, execute, and test, right, at a minimum. The training part sometimes you don't have to do in these sprints, but again, all right. So that's that. So we talked about the Scrum Master, responsible for this process, responsible for the daily Scrum stand-up meetings, and this project, the Scrum Master PM is also creating these what they call burn charts. How are we burning our or it's almost like the productivity, burn down, burn up your productivity. How well are we doing? So they look at how much hours were allocated to the 4 weeks, 80 hours or what? How many hours? 80 hours is like the maximum, or 60 hours, and then they will kind of look at these charts and see, okay, we've spent 30 hours and we've got 30 hours left, or we have spent almost 50% of our budget and we got 50% left. So these reports burn down how fast are we burning our dollars or our effort to produce. So and we look at these charts later on when we do the debrief 2 or the advanced version. Then we look at the burn down, burn up chart. So that's how he is sort of monitoring and controlling and these meetings are important. This sprint planning meeting happens in the planning phase, the sprint planning, and then you have a meeting called sprint review. Very important meeting. Sprint review is like your validation meeting, where you validate that you're doing things the way you're supposed to. So, and in this sprint review meeting, you have the team, you have the product owner, and you also have the customer. Now, the customer may be in your planning meetings. It's fine to have him here, but here they're just planning, right? But here they are reviewing the product with the customer and showcasing the product. If they have a website that they're building, they're showing the customer, this is how the website looks, and the customer is saying, I like the layout. I like the way you have positioned everything there. Maybe you want to change a few things here. This is not very user friendly. Maybe, so the customer can ask for some changes in the sprint review. And how many sprint reviews do you think you can have? If it's a 2 to 4 week sprint, you probably can only have 1 or 2 of these sprint reviews, right? But the purpose of this is really to validate and get ready for closing your sprint. And once you get an approval from the customer, then you can do what they call sprint retrospective. Sprint retrospective is almost like the sprint is over, or the last day of the sprint, or maybe a day after the sprint, you're doing a sprint retrospective. You're reflecting on how your sprint was done. It's almost like a reflection. And it's equal to your lessons learned meeting. So that's what they call it, retrospective. And here again, you're looking at the positives and negatives, and then you are going to, for your next sprint, you're going to take on what you've learned, and then improve hopefully the process for the next sprint if there was something you were lacking in. Now, if you discover something during these daily scrums, obviously you're going to then fix those things, right? If you find a process gap, you'll fix it right there and then. But this is like the end of the sprint. You are reflecting on how the sprint went, almost like the lessons learned. But this happens at the end. Unlike on your predictive, your lessons learned is happening. You're documenting your lessons learned throughout the phases. Here, everything is going so fast. You're doing. If you find something, if you spot something, you fix it. So you're not waiting until the end to do your reflection. You're being very proactive here, right? You're being very proactive. Which is how it's happening even in the you're taking corrective action as wrong things are happening, right? So you're taking those corrective actions here, but it's very fast. There's no time lapse here. As you see, you fix it. All right, so that's, and then closing. So that's where you close, and then you start a new sprint. Now, a lot of things in this dynamic environment happens. A lot of bad things can happen. We're not going to dwell on those bad things now, but we're going to come back to this and dwell on those bad things, because in the PMP exam, they're going to dwell on the bad things. If this happens, if you were in the sprint number 4, and then they jump to another question, sprint number 5, and then you have to sort of make sense of what was happening in sprint number 4. But if you understand what they do for planning, they do a sprint planning, and what is the purpose of the product backlog, what is the purpose of the sprint backlog, what is the purpose of the daily stand-ups, why do we have sprint reviews, what happens in the sprint retrospective, So you got to at least know those things to be able to put yourself in the spot, in the question, and then you can answer appropriately answer the question. All right. So when we get to those questions, you will, I think, be in a better position. Now, as I said, there is more to it than this. This is almost like the framework. This is the part which is more practical. This is the practical part.
Professor, I have a question.
Sure.
So, excuse me. So, in the sprint scenario, is there a close for each sprint, or do we do all of the sprints and then we close out the whole project? So,
yeah, go ahead.
In predictive, we have the initiation, planning, execution, monitor, and control, closing. But in sprint, is there several closings or just one big one?
Okay, very good question. If you are, let's say, working on building a website, for example, and that's your project, and in the planning phase, you looked at your backlog, and the backlog, let's say, has 50 things. And so you are working with the product owner, and you say, these 50 things would, if you do 5 every sprint, then that means 5 divided by 50, that's 10 sprints. We have to do 10 sprints before we can close this project. So they'll go through each sprint, and they're not going to close it. That would be sprint number 1. Then they're going to go and open up a new sprint, and that'll be their sprint number 2. And then at the end of the 10th sprint, let's say they are the 10th sprint. They're the 10th sprint now. They are now going to release the product. They are not going to release the product until they have done all 10 of them. But they are going to go through sprint retrospective after every sprint. So there will be 10 sprint retrospectives. But they're not going to close it. They're just going to say, okay, sprint number 1 is done. And just to add a few more things here. So let's say they started with 5 things, right? They start with 5, and they were only able to complete 4. So what do they do with the 5th one? Well, the sprint is over. 4 weeks have passed, and they still haven't completed all of it. 1 is still remaining. So they'll put that 1 back into the backlog. And then they'll start the next sprint. They're going to go back into the backlog, product backlog, and then pick another 5. And the one that they put back, they may either pick that one also for the second sprint, or they may not. Customer may say, you know what, if you weren't able to do it, let's just not do it that one now. We can do that one later. So the customer can actually decide that maybe that wasn't important. But on the other hand, the customer can say, yep, do this, the one that you weren't able to do that one on the next sprint. So that's how it goes. Any other question?
No, thank you.
All right. So in this PowerPoint, I also have 2 slides that sort of explains what I just explained. So you have something in writing also, in case you go back and want to review it. So like I said, this is the brief version. There is an advanced version which we will learn as we move forward. But this is good enough learning to start to use it in understanding where stakeholders come into play, where scope comes into play. So when we talk about the scope, or we talk about next, we can talk about resources. Then we can say, okay, I know what agile looks like, and in terms of resources, this is how a team is handled. This is what the team roles are in agile versus the team roles are in a predictive, right? So now that you have this idea of what an agile looks like, now we can sort of compare, contrast, and make more sense of it. All right, so it's 8:45. We are, is it 7:45? Sorry, it's 7:45. We're going to take a 15-minute break and be back here at 8 o'clock sharp. And then now we're going to switch gears and go back to stakeholder management. and then we're gonna do some problems. All right. And I'm going to check the chat to see if there's any emails there. Oh boy, you guys put a lot of them. Okay. It looks like I got Olivia's new email and Marcin email and Candace email. 3 emails.
Потому что ты его бил. Hey Google, what time is the Maghrib prayer today? in
Okay,
Houston?
8 o'clock. Is everyone back?
Yes, sir.
Olivia, Latrice, Azim. Half of you are here. What about Candice and Ernisha and Takira and Javier and Austin? Takira's here. Okay. All right. What I want to do is go to the spreadsheet that was on Canvas. There's some interesting stuff in there, some stuff that you would like because it is going to help you with the exam questions. So let me share my screen. Before I start, if there's any question that's on your mind, do ask before we begin. Okay, so I hope you guys can see the Excel spreadsheet. A couple of thumbs up would be good. Okay, I see, I got one. Olivia 2, Candice 3. Okay, that's good. Thank you. All right, this is, so we're back on stakeholder now, stakeholder management. And this is really good. I looked at some of the questions and they're really good questions here. So this is question and answer. There's no multiple choice here. It's going to pose a question and give you the answer. But there's a lot of learning here. But you can learn about stakeholder management by just doing this Q&A. And then when you actually go and take go back at the back of the chapter or online, this would really help you. So let's go through this and see what we can learn from these questions. Question number 1, How do you handle stakeholders who have conflicting interests? Remember, these stakeholders have power and interest, and they are not the same people. They are different people, right? They are from different departments, different interests, and are in the back of their mind. They're thinking, how is this product, service, or result going to help their department or the company? What value is going to be produced? What's in it for me? And so let's just read the answer. How do you handle them who have different conflicts, right? What's the answer? If they come up with different features, different requirements, or they argue with each other, how would you handle that situation? I believe in fostering open dialogue and finding common ground. I would facilitate a meeting or discussion to understand each stakeholder's perspective, encourage collaboration, and determine if there are any shared objectives that can be pursued. So the keywords here that I want you to remember is that you should be doing is, I would facilitate a meeting to understand each stakeholder's perspective to come to some consensus. So that is the thing to keep in back of your mind for the exam. Because there will be a situation and they'll say there's a conflict going on here. How would the PM react? What would the PM do? So this is the answer right here. Facilitation of a meeting to first understand each of the stakeholders' perspective and then coming to some consensus. All right. Number 2, question. What steps do you take to identify key stakeholders for a project? So how do you identify stakeholders? And so answer, I start by conducting a stakeholder analysis, which involves identifying individuals or groups who have significant interest in or impact on the project. So first is identifying individuals, and you know that we start to do that when we initiate the project. In the charter, there is an element called stakeholder names. So you start to identify them right at the outset, and it continues. I would review project documentation, interact with relevant teams, and conduct interviews or surveys to ensure a comprehensive stakeholder identification process. So in a nutshell, it's just saying that I'm going to identify individuals or groups by interacting with my team, customer, sponsor, and by interacting with them, I will find out who the rest of the folks are, who are other stakeholders who will have an impact, right? Because the people that you're going to be interfacing with are going to be your sponsor, your team, and your customer for the most part. For Agile, it's going to be your product owner, team, and the customer. And they're the ones who are going to tell you if you're missing anybody who should be in that sprint review. Remember the sprint review where they're going to review and the product, service, or result. Mostly it's going to be a product of some kind. All right, that's what we get from question number 2. Question number 3. How do you maintain effective communication with a stakeholder? All right, so you want to interact, right, somehow. So let's see what the answer is. I believe in regular proactive communication. How? I would establish clear communication channels and schedules, such as regular meetings. So the answer here is really through regular meetings, status updates, and newsletters. I would take into account stakeholders' preference for communication methods. That's very important, such as email, phone calls, or in-person meetings. So this sort of encapsulates part of your how I should engage with them and how I should manage them. And so meetings
Hey Google,
is really the prime
what
way
does the
you
word
will be
encapsulate
engaging with
means?
them. Although phone calls and emails are going to be secondary to that. Preferably, if you are doing project management and you are doing project management virtually, then meetings would be ideal, because obviously you can't meet with them face to face, right? In-person meetings and phone calls would be secondary. But on the other hand, if you are not doing a virtual type project and you're meeting with them off and on, then at the workplace, then obviously meeting, you could easily go to their office and talk to them in person. And that's what we used to do when we would be going back. All right. Next question. What do you do if a stakeholder becomes unresponsive or disengaged? That's another PMP question. So what do you do if the stakeholder becomes uninterested, don't want to come to your meetings, don't want to give you any feedback? What do you do? I would reach out to the stakeholder to understand the reason behind their disengagement. You see the word understand keeps coming up. Understand. So you got to understand, and the only way you can understand is through interaction, right? So I would reach out to the stakeholder to understand the reason behind their disengagement. If necessary, I would offer support, address any concerns they may have, and reassess their level of involvement in the project. Reassess their level of involvement. If
Professor, your video got lost for some reason. Can you?
Oh, did it? Sure. Sorry. How's that? Better?
No.
Okay, hold on. Let me say.
Yeah, it's WebEx masking. It's got that grid look on top of everything.
Oh, okay. You're talking about this guy here?
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah, now.
Oh, there we go. Now you can see it.
Okay, it's fine now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
okay,
better.
good. All right. Do bring to my attention if I can stop and start again, so that may help. All right, so we are on this question number 4. What do you do if a stakeholder become unresponsive? I remember one time something like that happened on a big project, and one of my peers, asked me, that one of the stakeholders is not coming to their meetings, or responding to the emails and whatnot. So I told that person, you got to keep them engaged, even though they are not showing their interest. And he said, how am I supposed to do that? I said, keep him or her in your status reports. That would be a minimum. But let's see what the answer here is. I will reach out to the stakeholder to understand. Again, reach out to understand their behavior, right? What's going on. If necessary, I would offer support, address any concerns, and reassess their level of involvement in the project. If the disengagement persists, I would escalate the issue to higher management or explore alternative strategies to re-engage them. So first off, you got to find out what's going on by interacting with them, and then if that doesn't work, you escalate. So that's the official answer here. So you got to keep with this official answer. But there are also other answers. Like I said, you could keep them updated by providing them with status reports. But keeping them in the loop is very, very essential. Even once you say he or she is a stakeholder, has an interest, and if they don't show interest, but you know that they are interested because they were in the list, you got to make sure they're in the loop. They're in the loop one way or another. Find out why they're not in the loop, and that's what it's saying here. And then say, okay, what should we do to keep you in the loop? Question number 5: how do you handle stakeholders who? Another PMP question: how do you handle stakeholders who constantly change their requirements? And a question like this is gonna come and hit you hard from many directions. It won't be as straightforward as this question, but it'll be in there. The meaning would be in there, So the question is, what do you do? I would emphasize the importance of having a clearly defined scope and change management process from the outset. If the stakeholder have new requirements, I would assess their impact on the project, discuss the implications with the project team, and seek consensus on whether the changes can be accommodated within the project constraints. So let's just dwell on this from a learning standpoint on this sentence, the last sentence here, this mark that I read. So
Your
that is
video
where the
got lost again, sir.
And
Yeah,
you
it came back again.
Okay, you know what? I'm moving my headphone a little bit. Let me just try to not move too much. Okay, hope it's okay now. Is it working?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm gonna stay just like this as like a statue. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's think about this. They're coming to you with new requirements. I told you when you are in the planning phase, you can entertain changes, right? When you're in the planning. But when you go into execution, if a stakeholder comes to you with changing requirements, you can then say, okay, I'm going to document what you want. That's the first thing you may want to do. Understand. Document means understand. I'm going to understand what you want. And then you're going to assess the impact. Document what you want, assess the impact to the project. You want me to add, or do scope creep, right? It could be scope creep, right? It's keeping the scope. So you assess the impact by, how will you assess the impact? By looking at the triple constraint, always. Triple constraint is your friend and is the easy answer for everything. Triple constraint. Okay, you want me to make a change? Okay, let me look at my triple constraint, which has three things on it. What are three things? Cost, time, and schedule. Cost, time, cost, time is schedule, and then budget, the dollar sign. So those three things. So that's the impact. Is there any impact to cost? No. Is there an impact to timeline? Yes, because they want me to add new stuff that's going to take another 2 weeks. Do I have extra 2 weeks in my schedule? And so those are things you have to determine by doing this impact analysis. So this is a PMP question again. It'll be posted to you in many different formats, different forms. Secretly, they'll put it in there, and then you should know what to do. Jump at that. Next one. How do you have experience dealing with difficult stakeholders? Another thing. All these questions are about things going wrong or things happening in this dynamic world of project management. And what do you do when these things happen? Assumption is you already know how to do projects. Assumption is you already are experienced these things, or you're learning. You learned all this in the class, or the professor told you all these things. Okay, so I'm telling you all these things. Do you have experience dealing with difficult stakeholders? You're going to have that, right? That can happen. How do you handle it? Answer, yes. I have encountered difficult stakeholders in the past. I believe in actively listening to their concern. Again, understand. Actively listen to their concern. And how can you understand by listening, right? Treating them with respect and addressing any issues or misunderstanding promptly. I would also explore alternative solutions or compromises to find a mutually beneficial outcome. All of these questions are your PMP questions in one form or another, all of these. And you see, this is the kind of question they're going to be asking, things going wrong. All right, let's go to the next one. And this is in your spreadsheet, in your canvas. Question number 7. What steps do you take to ensure stakeholders are satisfied with the project outcomes? Right? Satisfaction, you have to satisfy the stakeholders. How would you do that? I involve the stakeholders early when you're doing especially when you're doing agile. You have to involve them early. Remember when you're doing the backlog stuff and you're looking at the user stories with the team in the sprint planning, you can invite them there also, because you're sort of figuring out which 5 you're going to be taking up, or which 4, or which 10. That's arbitrary, right? So how many you can take. So I would engage in a candid conversation. Oh, no, I'm sorry, one above. I involve stakeholders early and frequently throughout the project lifecycle. I seek their input, provide regular updates, and actively address any concerns or feedback they may have. I also ensure that final project deliverables align with their expectations as closely as possible. This could be one of the answers to this problem in the PMP exam. And so you just have to make sure you go through these questions and know the answer, know how to approach it. Next, how do you handle stakeholders who have unrealistic expectations? One was, the one above here was difficult. Here was constantly change their requirements. They keep changing their requirements, right? And this one here is unrealistic expectations. They want you to do something that doesn't make any sense at all. So how would you handle that one? I would engage again, engage and understand in a candid conversation with the stakeholder to understand, right, their expectations and provide them with a realistic assessment of what can be achieved within the project constraints. I would explore the alternative options or compromises that can better align with their expectations while maintaining project feasibility. Again, you're going to understand what they want, and then you're going to assess the impact. You can do the impact analysis. Again, triple constraint, and one of the constraints could be cost, scope, timeline, and then go from there. Next, what technique do you use to influence and gain support from stakeholders? Okay, this is a good one also. So what are the techniques? I focus on building strong relationships and credibility with the stakeholders. How? I use persuasion and effective communication skills to articulate the project benefits, address any concerns, and align their interest with project objectives. How do you do all that? You have a meeting with one-on-one meeting with them. First of all, you have to understand who they are and what they're looking for. That's very important. And as you meet with them, you understand what they're looking for. One of my project sponsors, she is a number person. She's looking for numbers, and she's always trying to see if there's any gaps where she can help. And so, you should always go and bring up solutions and say, what do you think? What do you think? X, Y, and Z. So that's how you influence them, by asking questions, by giving them a status, asking questions, and then persuading them with numbers, right? Persuading them with numbers, and that helps you articulate your concern, or their concern, actually, if that's what the problem is. Next one, number 10, how do you prioritize conflicting stakeholder demands? I take systematic approach to evaluate the impact, always understand the impact and urgency of each demand. I consider factors such as stakeholder influence, the alignment with project objectives, and the potential risks and benefits. I would then engage in a collaborative discussion or negotiation to strike a balance and ensure fairness in addressing conflicting demands. So really, it's all about meeting of the minds and striking a balance. And having an exchange really with them, better understand, and then say, okay, you want us to make this change. You are demanding. You have a concern, and you're demanding us to do something. Let's see what we can do for you and what we cannot do for you. So I would engage with them, have a meeting, and discuss the situation so we can come up with some sort of understanding and solution of their concern. Next, how do you handle stakeholders who are resistant to change? A good one. Who don't want to change. So you're trying to do your stuff, and you're persuading them to look at your approach, and they're saying, no, we want to do it my way. So there's a conflict here, right? There's resistance to your way or the team's way. So what would you do? I would try to understand their concern. Always understand, meet, impact analysis. Understand, meet, impact analysis. So that's what we do here. I would try to understand their concern by engaging in open and honest conversation, meeting, right? I would then provide them with clear and compelling reasons for the change and emphasize the potential benefits. So here he wants to change the way you want to do things, so you have to give them the facts of why you want to do it your way, right? I would also involve them in decision-making process and address any fears or uncertainties they may have. So this is a complete answer. Takeaway again is understanding, first listening, listen, understand, meet, understand by meeting, and then impact.
It seems like all the answers are the same, right?
Yeah. Do you see how if you really understand these four things, and the question could be thrown at you in different ways, right? But the answer is really the four things: listen, understand, meet, and impact. Those things, and those things really gives you the way or the method to address all of these. But I'm throwing all these different ways they're going to come to you. Next one. What strategies do you use to build trust with stakeholders? Okay, now this one is a bit different because you're trying to build trust, but again, it goes back to, meeting with them, right? To build trust, you have to listen to them, you have to understand what their needs are, you have to meet with them, that's it. Forget the impact part. Those first three things. The key here is actually involving. And also involve them. Involving, we didn't put in those four things. Involvement is a given now. So keep that in the back of your mind. You have to involve the stakeholders as much as possible to satisfy them. Because they're going to, otherwise they'll have questions on the back of their mind and they're going to give you problems. They're going to bring up the concerns at odd times and they will be not happy. They would not be happy because you are not engaging them the right way. And again, what are the right ways of engagement? You got to make sure they are in those interactions that you're having with the team or with the project. They are in the loop. They're in the loop via email or reports or face-to-face or any of those mechanisms that you have outlined in your team governance, project governance. So trust building, transparency. Transparency actually is a trust building for not only stakeholders, it's for even your team. And I've said that many times now. Be transparent, be open to all your documentation, make sure they are aware of where your documentation is, where your schedule is, where your issues are, where everything is. So you don't want to be bitten and you don't want to bite them. You see both ways at different times or when they're totally unaware and suddenly you bring up something, and they're not even aware of it. How do you handle stakeholders who do not have clear understanding of the project objectives? So let's see again, those 4 or 5 things that mentioned would again come into play. How? I would take the initiative to clarify the project objective. So here is explain. So you listen, you meet, you understand, and in this case, you have to explain. In this case, explain the objectives so they are on the same page with you. Next, how do you deal with stakeholders who continually request changes outside of the project scope? Now, this one was so something they're bringing up that may not have relevancy. There was somebody sent me. So Javier, did you send me something?
Yeah, I did a little bit of research while you were speaking on those blocks that we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out there's a WebEx thing. It says if you do Control-Alt-Shift-H, and this is from their website, plus H.
Okay,
Control-Alt-Shift-H.
Shift H. What does that do?
It supposedly clears the screen, so next time you have it should not happen anymore.
Okay, hold on. Let me just write this down. Hold on a second. Control.
I put it on the chat.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah, it went away and it has come back to haunt me.
Well, it's Web is trying to protect your privacy. So if pop-ups and stuff like that, it will block those.
Oh, okay.
So we'll see that gray box in our side.
Okay, so Control or Shift, and what was the last thing?
H,
H.
the letter. Yeah.
Okay, got it. I'm gonna. So hopefully by next week I'll get this right now. I think.
It's all good.
Yeah, let's just keep going.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I meant to send that to you, and I sent it to everyone. My bad.
No, it's okay. So I'm glad you sent it to me at least, and this is good information for everybody if they ever come across this thing. All right. So where were we? How do you deal with stakeholders who continually request changes outside the project scope? Okay, this is again a stakeholder that is asking for stuff that was probably not in scope. Something that we already addressed above. I would address this request by referring to the agreed upon project scope and the change management process. So every time they want to make a change, you have to go back to change control. But before to get to change control, you have to listen to them, what they want. Again, understand, get an understanding, meet with them, listen to them, then do your impact analysis. And then once you do your impact analysis, then you would sort of know whether you can accept this change that they're requesting, right? You cannot accept their change unless you've done the impact analysis. Let's say you've done the impact analysis, and it's a one week that you may have to add, and you say, okay, I probably have that 1 week in my schedule. I put in some extra time that we can take it in and we can do it, and there's no extra cost involved. So you have to do that to deal with it, but the first few things you have impact analysis. After impact will be change control. So change control is another thing that you have to add on to this. Listen, understand, meet, explain sometimes, impact analysis, then change control. So that's the sort of the steps you have to memorize in your head for all these different variations of the same question they're going to be asking you in different ways. And you can answer all of those questions by just have that understanding what they're doing to you to confuse you basically. How do you manage stakeholders with competing priorities? Again, how do you communicate project progress to stakeholders effectively? Okay, this is about communication. So you can depending on how they want to be satisfied, you can give them a milestone report. You can give them. So this is based on that. So let's just that's an easy one. What do you do if a stakeholder is constantly dissatisfied with project outcomes? So that can happen. You give them something and they're dissatisfied. I would take their feedback again, listen and find out why, right? And find out why, understanding, and then discuss the concern with the team, and then figure out what the root cause is. So this is a little bit twist to the those 4 or 5 things. There's a little twist here. So when you say you're explaining or you're understanding, you sometimes have to go and find the root cause of their as part of the discussion with them. You may not know immediately what the right answer would be to respond to their dissatisfaction. So you may have to go back to your team, and then they sort of go through the best way to get down to the bottom of anything is root cause analysis, right? You do a root cause analysis and figure out what the root cause is. Why is this stakeholder upset? There was one stakeholder I remember. She was upset, and we figured out what the reason she was upset was because the team were working on the research for a couple of weeks, and they had not included her or updated her on what was going on. She was thinking, hey, what is the team doing? And so we said we're going to provide a weekly update to the stakeholders, so then she knows that we're doing something. We're not just sitting and doing nothing, right? So she was in the background just worried, maybe the guys are not doing anything. So they were doing something, but they just did not inform her of what they were doing. So that was that. So she was dissatisfied. She was not happy. But then after we started giving her these weekly reports, she was happy, and then we started inviting her to the meetings also more on a regular basis, weekly basis. Not weekly basis, but every other week. And as we needed her, we would invite her. How do you handle stakeholders who are not actively engaged in the project? So this is one of them that stays in the background. And so so here I would proactively reach out to them. You got to reach out to them somehow, either through reports, through emails, or through status reports. I would explore ways to make the project more relevant to their objective or offer support to increase their engagement. So just keep that in back of your mind. 19, and I think we have two more. So how do you ensure that stakeholders' expectations are properly managed? Again, it's nothing new here. How do you handle stakeholders who have limited understanding of the project's technical aspects? So you got people who are customers who don't know IT, right? And you're building. I had a stakeholder who was asking me in one of my one-on-ones with her, what does this mean? I'm totally lost. So she was having a one-on-one with me and she was asking me questions about the technical stuff because she had no clue. And so you gotta interact with that person. You gotta again engage with them, or train them, or some sort of way to bring them on the same page. All right, that's it. These are 20 hot questions that you are going to see in the PMP exam in one form or another on stakeholder management, and so. So let's continue with a little bit of I'm going to pause here now. Any questions about what we have done thus far, from start to end? If there's any question that's on the back of your mind.
I have a question. So there will be in the exam there will be questions like in this form where we will have to write it down or give the
so Azim, it's almost like you have a question, right, and you have one answer.
Yeah.
In the exam, you're going to have a question, and then you have 4 answers.
Oh, okay.
And
so it will be test. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be like a test format. Now, your questions here, like a one-liner. In the exam, they may give you a story. They may give you a situation. Oh, stakeholders are talking to each other and they are in conflict, or you're doing a website development project and there was a feature to be developed. So they'll put together a story, as if they won't just say they're having a conflict. They'll just create a story which would be around conflict, and then what the right answer should be because you have seen all these different scenarios. These are all different variations that they could pose to you. And so you may have, for example, there were 20 variations. They like 20. So your 20 of your questions may be just around this variation. So I sort of have, I'm giving you enough information that you can feel comfortable answering those variations. So at the back of the book, when you start to do stakeholder questions, this should help you. But yeah, this is just an answer, a direct answer, the right answer. That's what they're giving you. But obviously in the PMP exam, you will get 1 or 2 great answers and 2 totally bad answers. And you just have to eliminate the bad answers and then dwell on those 2 good answers and pick the best answer. And knowing the approach that they're showing you here, you got to listen, you got to understand, you got to explain, you got to what else you got to do? You got to do the impact analysis, and you got to keep them involved. And then after the impact analysis, then you can make the change, yes or no. And sometimes you can reject. Sometimes you can say no, we cannot do it. And then in Agile, if you cannot do it, what's the recourse? You can tell the stakeholder because of time constraints. If that's one of the answers, time constraints, the feature that they requested will not be included in that sprint. Will not be included because you have a fixed time, 2 to 4 weeks. It'll probably include in the next sprint. So that would be the answer there. That you can't. There's no change control in sprints, right? Either they can do it or they cannot. And if they don't have time, they can just say no, it cannot be done. In the predictive, there's a change control, and you're going to go through the impact analysis. In Agile, you can you doing your sprint reviews, if they come up with a new feature, a use story, You can just say we ran out of time. We're going to do that on the next sprint. We just can't add on, right? There's no change control here. You just do in the time box 2 to 4 weeks whatever you pick up from the backlog. You pick up the user stories, you go through it, and then you stop. If they come up with new ideas, those ideas will go back into the backlog for the next sprint because you don't have time. All right. So this is in your spreadsheet, and I'm going to try to do that for every chapter. At least come up with these kind of questions, and also actually there's more. Actually, there's some more. Maybe some of them may repeat, but that's fine.
I very much like that idea of reviewing questions like that.
Yeah. I'm going to try to see if I can get questions like these, which would help you. At least will teach you the mindset. What should the PM's mindset be to tackle any of these variations? All right. So let's go into because I have some more actually. That maybe some of them may be repetitive, but it's okay. Let's go to the next segment, the last segment. So I'm not going to do any problems today. You can do it on your own because I want to complete I will be doing problems, but in a different way. So, but not from the book today. Today we're going to do it like we did right now here. I'm going to do another set. Let me go back to my PowerPoint and let's complete that chapter first. So just hang in there. And let's see. Because we got still some. Okay. This one. Okay. So let's just this takes its course and move it on the side here. All right. So in the stakeholder chapter in the PowerPoint that is on Canvas, there is a section at the end of this PowerPoint that also dwells on the questions. And very similar to what we did earlier. So let's go through that. Number one, stakeholders in conflict or resisting requirements. What is the best thing to do? Right. Very similar to what we did. Meet to discuss the issue, clarify the error with established ground rules, and identify any issues that may have surfaced later on. Keep them informed throughout the project. Okay. Meet to discuss the issue, clarify the error, and establish ground rules, or just ground rules is based on whether it's agile or it's a predictive, whether you can actually even do impact analysis. Now, sometimes you can, sometimes you cannot. So next one is stakeholder management is not going to bring ultimate project success, but conformance to requirements and bringing project value will. Like this one, let's take it out. This is not a good one, so let's just leave this one. Next one, bad performance of a few members, what to do? So this is this is not actually pertinent to stakeholder management chapter, but this is about resources. So if some of your team members are not performing well, they are not performing up to par, what do you do? Again, you meet with them, find out the cause, and find a solution. Meet with them, find the cause, and find a solution. That's the answer. And solution could be training. Solution could be mentoring them. Solution could be review roles and responsibility. So those, or anything else. So it's very similar to how we address stakeholder problems. Here, instead of stakeholders, we have team members who have a different sort of issue. It's all about things going wrong, right? It's all about things going wrong, situations. All right, so that's another one here. Let's go on to the next one here. All right, here you have some more. So stakeholder analysis, there is a model called salient. I don't think they're going to ask this question in PMP. this is a model that there are two models.
Не
Actually, there's
вытянется,
one
though.
that dwells or talks about power and interest, which we're gonna go over in after the slide, and the other one is salient, SALIENT, and I'll show you how that looks. But it really is about the power, urgency, and legitimacy. So those three. How if you in the question, if you see power mentioned, if you see urgency mentioned, if you see legitimacy mentioned in the question, and in the answers you see salient, then you know that's the right answer. So that's how you remember this one. Power, urgency, legitimacy. If you see that in the question, then the answer is salient model. And I'll show you how that looks when we go to a different slide, but just keep that in the back of your mind. Stakeholders, how to overcome stakeholder resistance, schedule meeting to update. So this is a repetition of what we already did. Stakeholder, what if customer is dissatisfied in hybrid or comes up with a new change after go live? Now, we didn't talk about that. After go live, what do you do? Improve in next iteration. Well, I did mention that, right? I did mention if somebody comes back and says, hey, add something to it, and you're an agile. If you're an agile type methodology, if somebody comes back, somebody being the stakeholder, you're not going to say we're going to go ahead and do it. You're going to say we're going to do it in the next iteration, next sprint. So that's the answer for that one. Another question that can involve things like, okay, this one is interest/power. If you have a stakeholder that has high interest and high power, or high interest and low power, you keep them informed. And we'll look at this one, and let me get my little stencil here working. We'll look at this one, and we'll look at this one in another slide. So just so I'm noting here, but this keep informed, there's keep informed, and there's a couple other options, but keep informed is the best one for somebody who has high interest but low power. Just keep them informed. But anyways, I'm just put an asterisk here, and we'll look at those. Let's go back, look at them right now. Here we go. So let's move this right here. All right. So this is a stakeholder that has power, varying from low here to high, and then interest, low interest to high. You need to memorize this slide. And what should you memorize? You should focus on high power and low interest. What do? You keep informed. If the stakeholder has high power and low interest, you keep them informed by, giving them status reports, keeping them updated, whatnot. If you have low interest and low power stakeholder, you just monitor them. If you have high interest and high power, you manage them closely. Makes sense, right? If the person has a lot of power and a lot of interest, you want to make sure you manage them closely, or else they can create issues for you, right? If they are so interested and have a lot of power, like the president, right? President has a lot of power and may have a lot of interest. You're going to manage them very closely. Think of the president. So if somebody has high power but low interest, you just keep them informed. So these are the type of questions in PMP that they may ask. So depending on the type of stakeholder you have, what should you do? And there are two other alternatives here. If you have low power and high interest, you just keep them satisfied. So just memorize this little slide, or this domain, chart here. And this is the salient one, SALIENT. So here, where you have a demanding stakeholder on one side, and a discretionary stakeholder on this side, and a dormant stakeholder on this side, and a dangerous stakeholder here, dominant stakeholder here. I mean, all kinds. And then you have one that's sort of in the middle. But the thing to look for are these things: legitimacy, power, and urgency. If you see three words, keywords in your problem, then the answer is salient model. So they may ask you, given the situation, there is power, there's legitimacy, there's urgency, what sort of model are we talking about? Then you can say the model is salient. That's all I can tell you about this one. This one is sort of easy to understand and makes a lot of sense here. This is not very useful, this one here. This one is very useful. I use this quite a bit. So just memorize this page, this slide, and that'll help you. All right. Back to our Olivia has a question. What about the stakeholder cube? So stakeholder cube is sort of like this one here. It's sort of like this one, and it also has different variations. So stakeholder cube is not very popular, and let's take a look at it. I don't think is it in the book? Let me see if it's in the book here.
Yeah, it's in the book.
Which page? Do you know what page it's on?
Give me 1 second.
I'm looking at it right now. Let's see.
I think it's 473.
73. Okay, so the folks who have the book, we are looking at the different models. So we talked about two models, right? We talked about the salient model, and we talked about this power interest grid model. This was model number 1. This is model number 2. The other one that Oliver mentioned is the cube model. It's called the stakeholder cube, CUBE, number 3. And in this on page is 473. Page 473. You just have to have an understanding of what these are. But the one that is the most popular and easy to follow is number 1. That's what they ask you a lot of questions about. The number 3 and number 2 and 3 are not something they will. They may. I've never seen a question come up, but it's good to know. It's in both books. Azim, it's in both books. It's in 10th and it's also in 11th. Olivia, you're looking at the 11th book. Which book do you have?
I have the 10th. The 11 didn't arrive yet, so it's
Okay.
gonna come tomorrow.
So Azim, I think it should be around the same page, between 472 and 476, or you can look it up in the index. But let's go over it. I can. So let me just show you what that looks like. So we already looked at both of these. The cube looks like it's just like a cube. It's shaped like this. And you have interest on one side. You have attitude. These two are not very popular. This one on the cube and the salient not very popular. The grid, power interest is very popular and is very useful. That's what they talk about. But since it's in the book, it's good to know. So interest on one side, attitude on the other axis, and then on this dimension you have power. So it's a relationship between power, interest, and attitude. And you can just boil this one down actually to our grid one. You can put the attitude right here. You can say attitude. And you can use this one or that one. So let me read from the book here. The salience model, which is this one here, is used to group stakeholders based on the appropriateness of their involvement, how involved they are. So legitimacy means, how involved they are, their interest really, the interest. And their authority or ability to influence, that's the power, right? On this side, the power. And then the third, and their need for immediate action. And this is the urgency is the action. So I would still boil all of these to power and interest. That's really in 2 dimension, you can pretty much explain and track them. So those are a little bit sophisticated, the power and the salient and the cube. I just would want you to understand what they are. If they give you interest, they give you power, and they give you attitude, they're talking about the cube. If they give you legitimate, the keywords legitimacy, urgency, and power, they're talking about salience. If they only talk about power and interest, they're talking about the power interest grid. Okay, that's how you know those three. So just page 473 in the 10th edition, 11th edition. You just have to look it up. Next time I'm going to bring my 10th edition here and help you guys out. But I think you can look into it. Oh, 356.
It's
Okay.
on page 356 in book in the
All right.
11th.
Okay, thank you guys. 356. So look at 356 and look at 473 for the 10th and 356 in the 11th. But like I said, it really boils down to 2 axes, the power axis and the interest axis. That's really important from a practical standpoint, from an application standpoint, and everything. I think PMP is mostly, from what I've gone through, it's all about practicality, usefulness. And so, but in case they do talk about cube, now what that is, right? It has attitude in addition to power and interest. And if they talk about salience, it has 3 things: power, urgency, and legitimacy. Those 3 things. So keep that in mind, and you'll be in good shape. All right, so let's just spend another 10 minutes and we can call it a day for now. All right, so but your homework is going to be, you have to go and do those questions at the end of the book or online for this chapter, given what we have kind of gone over, and sort of try to get to understand more by doing the questions on your own. And starting next week, we're going to go on a new chapter, resources. But we'll come back to all of these at some later point when we start to review them. All right. So you know your homework now. Let's go back to this one, stakeholders. So we talked about stakeholders want changes that cannot be implemented. We said they're going to have to go to the next sprint. Okay, so we talked about that one. Stakeholders identify stakeholders in what phase? When do we start to identify stakeholders?
It's in a planning phase, but it can happen during execution.
Yeah, exactly. Starting in initiation, continues throughout. Okay? Just like lessons learned, just like risk. Stakeholders' conflicts can be handled by what? Focus group discussions with conflicting stakeholders to discuss. Especially if you have multiple stakeholders having issues, then you got to bring them together. Okay? If you got one stakeholder having issue, then you go meet with that one stakeholder. If you have multiple stakeholders having issues, then you got to bring them together. You are the ones who are going to schedule that meeting and bring them in so they can discuss their conflicts and then come up with a consensus. That's the way to resolve issues like that when you have multiple stakeholder issues. Stakeholders manage them all. Yeah. Let's say if you have stakeholders, should you just manage the sponsors? No, you should manage all of them. Your customers, your sponsors, everybody. So stakeholders are not accepting. Somebody asked a question. Okay, so stakeholders not accepting their deliverables. What to do? If the stakeholders, you provide them with a deliverable in the sprint review, they don't like it. Well, if they don't like it, the why question comes up, right? Why? Find out the reason and whether it meets the requirement. So remember, you're building, whenever the team builds anything, they build from what? From the requirements, right? From the design, which comes from where? From requirements. Everything goes back to requirements. Your design, your blueprint, everything comes from requirements. So if somebody doesn't like what you have built, but the team has built from the design came from the requirements. So first you have to ask them why you don't like the deliverables, then you go back to the requirements. I had this a project where this exact same thing happened. We were ready to go live, and the sponsor said, or the customer said, they don't like the product. And we said, well, we build it according to the requirements. So first we figured out why they don't like it. Then they said they don't like X, Y, and Z. Okay, then we went back to the requirements to see if those X, Y, and Z are in the requirements or not. If they're not in the requirements, that means those were changes, new changes, right? But if they were in the requirements and we didn't give it to them, that's our problem. That's the team's problem. Then we got to fix it. We got to go in and satisfy them. But in this case, they asked for a couple of things that were not in the requirements. So we were sort of safe. It was safe because we just did what we were told to do, what were in the requirements. So this kind of question can come in the PMP, right? They can ask you these things. What do you do when you're validating and it doesn't meet the requirement? It doesn't meet their satisfaction. Okay, what do? You ask them why, and then you go back, look at the requirements to see if the requirements were met or not met. And then you can do after that, then you can do the impact analysis, and you can, those things that we mentioned. So this is a new thing here. So this one is new, the requirement part. This one here, right here. Stakeholder rejection of product. We said why, the why question. Conflict, focus meeting, right? New change control. Again, listen, meeting, understand, understand, impact, and then change control. I think the rest we'd already discussed these. All right, so that's it for stakeholder management. These are the kind of questions that they're going to ask you, and we sort of gone through the 20 questions we went through are pretty much what they're going to be asking you about in different situations. Try to get those 20 down, get them down, read them, understand them, and those 4 or 5 things I mentioned, how you should sort of look at each one of them, and that's really is it. So any other thoughts from the team before we? I'm going to try this, Javier. This is what you just gave me. Alt, see if this goes away from when we meet on.
Well, try the link. It has a couple of different ones. There's another one in there on that link. It says something about control Q.
Okay.
So,
I'm gonna go there. Let me go to the link and just copy all of that stuff that you put out there, so I won't lose it. So let me stop this here. I do appreciate you looking into that.
no problem. I've seen it before. That's why I knew there was a solution.
Okay. I knew. I mean, I had this problem actually once before, and then somehow it went. And I thought maybe it was because of bandwidth. I had not put in my. I got off Wi-Fi. I don't get on here through Wi-Fi because Wi-Fi doesn't give me all the bandwidth I need. So maybe I thought maybe that was the reason. Maybe that's not it. Okay, so maybe. I'm copying all of this stuff here, including your emails again. So,
Yeah, can you? I never got the slide and.
Yeah, I'm going to send another email with the same stuff. So
Okay.
let's see, and if once you receive it, just send me a note. Hey, I got
Okay.
it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, an okay would be good. All right, guys, appreciate you all being here, and just keep coming to the class. And your final really is all about you coming to the class. If you come to the class, I may not have you take the final. It's very important that you come to the class. That's how you learn. That's really what I want you guys to get through is to understand, and that's done through learning yourself, making an effort. All right. So with that said, next Monday we'll start a new chapter.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Have a good day.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Professor. Good night.